Hi there, night owls. Welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. If you're into real-life horror stories to chill your bones before bed, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment telling me what you would have done in this situation. Now, turn off the lights, plug in your headphones, and let me tell you the story of the woman who cried outside my window every 3 a.m. in Portland. It all began in November 2022, just after Thanksgiving weekend. I had just moved into a small apartment in northwest Portland, right near the edge of Forest Park, where the city starts blending into pine-covered hills. The building was old, built in 1928, with wooden floors that creaked under every step and windows so thin they let in every sound from the street. I didn't mind the noise. In fact, I found it comforting. The faint hum of traffic, the wind brushing against the glass, the sound of footsteps from the neighbor above. It all became a kind of nighttime rhythm. I was 28 at the time, working as a freelance graphic designer, mostly during late hours. My name's Daniel Monroe, and I've always been a night person. The silence of those early morning hours gave me peace. Or so I thought. The first time I heard her was on December 1st. I remember it clearly because it was the first night I didn't fall asleep with music playing. It was 3:03 a.m. when I sat upright in bed, startled by a soft, heartbreaking sound sobbing. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I sat still, trying to catch the sound again. Then it came, a long, broken wail, the kind that holds more pain than any words ever could. A woman, somewhere just outside my window, crying into the darkness. I live on the second floor, so I crept toward the window and pulled back the curtain just a few inches, just enough to see. The street below was damp from earlier rain. The orange glow of a flickering street lamp lit the sidewalk. But there was no one there. Still, the crying continued, as if it was right below me. Yet the space was empty. I waited. I listened. Around 4 a.m., it stopped. The next night, it happened again. Same time, 3 a.m. sharp. The same crying. The same shaky breathing. This time, I decided to record it. I grabbed my phone and hit the record button, holding it near the glass. Later, I sent the audio to my sister, Megan, who lives down in Eugene. She replied almost instantly. "That sounds real. Like human real. You should call the cops." I didn't. Not yet. I was curious. I wanted to believe there was some rational explanation. Maybe someone who wandered through the neighborhood late at night. A homeless woman, maybe. Or a prank. But something in the way the crying sounded. It didn't feel like it belonged in this world. The next morning, I went downstairs to ask the landlord, Mr. Callahan, a quiet man in his 70s who lived in the unit below. When I asked if he'd ever heard crying at night, he gave me a long look before answering. "You're not the first tenant in that unit who's mentioned crying," he said. I asked how long it had been going on. He looked down at the floor. "Long enough," he said. And that was it. He didn't explain further, didn't offer help, just closed his door. I couldn't let it go. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark near the window, watching the street below with the curtains slightly open, holding my phone like a weapon. At exactly 3 a.m., the air around me seemed to shift. A sudden cold, as if something unseen had passed through the room. Then came the sobbing again. But this time, I saw her. Just for a second, a pale figure moving slowly between the alley beside the building. I couldn't see her face, just the shape, the movement, the sadness. Then the hallway light inside my apartment flickered. Just once. My heart was pounding. I backed away from the window and turned on every light in the apartment. That was the first time I felt something other than curiosity. I felt fear. I slept at my friend Carlos' place the next few nights. He laughed it off at first, until I played the audio for him. His smile faded. He told me to stay with him as long as I needed. But on the 5th night, I went back. I had to. This time, I brought an old Polaroid camera my dad had given me years ago. He used to say film captured things digital couldn't. I sat by the window with the camera ready. At 2:59, the street was silent. At exactly 3 a.m., the crying began again. I aimed toward the alley and pressed the shutter. The picture developed slowly. I held it under the light and stared. In the photograph, there was something standing in the alley. Tall, white-faced, but not human, not fully. And that was only the beginning. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo. The thing in the picture had no clear face. Its skin looked too smooth, almost waxy, and its head was slightly tilted as if it knew I was watching. It wasn't shaped like a person should be. The arms were too long. The figure was slightly blurred around the edges, like smoke clinging to a shadow. The next morning, I tried to tell myself it could be a trick of the light. Maybe a glare from the street lamp. Maybe something on the lens. But no matter how much I tried to explain it away, a cold unease had settled in my chest. I emailed the photo to Megan. She didn't respond right away. When she did, the reply was short. Dan, that's not normal. Don't go back there. I didn't reply. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, I found myself pacing the apartment. Every creak in the floorboard made me jump. I locked the front door, then checked it again. I pulled down all the blinds. Still, I felt watched, like the air around me had changed somehow. At 2:45 a.m., I sat down in the same chair by the window. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't leave. Something in me needed to see her again. Not out of curiosity anymore. Something deeper. Something that felt like a pull. When the clock on the microwave blinked to 3 a.m., it began. But not how I expected. This time, the crying didn't come from outside. It came from inside the apartment. Soft at first, like it was in another room. Then louder. Closer. I stood up slowly, heart racing, and moved toward the hallway. The bathroom door was cracked open. No lights on. Just blackness behind it. I reached for the switch. The bulb flickered once, twice, then went out, and the crying stopped. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, afraid to move. I couldn't hear anything now. No crying, no wind, not even traffic. Just silence so thick it rang in my ears. Then the cold returned. It wasn't like normal cold. This wasn't air conditioning or a window left open. It was the kind of cold that sinks into your bones, that makes your skin feel like paper. And along with it came a smell. Faint, old, like dirt and wet cloth. I turned on every light in the apartment again, and didn't sleep until the sun came up. That morning, I went online and started searching. Crying woman, 3 a.m. Portland, haunting. Most of what came up were ghost stories, blog posts, urban legends. Nothing specific. Nothing helpful. But then, on the third page of results, buried in a thread on a local history forum, I found a post titled, "Woman Crying Near Forest Park Every Night?" It was posted in 2015. A man named Travis had written it. He described a woman crying outside his apartment near the edge of Forest Park. Same area I live in now. Always at 3 a.m. He said he lived there for 7 months before he moved out. In one of his replies, he mentioned a name. Elaine Rooker, 34 years old. Disappeared in 1983. I copied the name and started digging. According to old news clippings archived by the Oregon Historical Society, Elaine Rooker had been reported missing in December of that year. Last seen walking home from a late shift at a diner just off Burnside. Her apartment was just 3 blocks from where mine now stands. Her body was never found. Her case went cold. But in one of the final articles about her disappearance, the last person to see her alive, a co-worker, said Elaine looked pale and scared the night she vanished. She kept saying someone was following her, that she heard whispering outside her window at night. I stopped reading. My mouth was dry. My hands tingled. That night, I left the lights on. Every single one. I also set up a second phone near the bathroom, just to record in case the crying returned inside. At 3 a.m., it returned. Not just the crying this time. There were whispers, clearer than before. They didn't sound like Elaine. They didn't sound like anyone I've ever heard. One voice, low and distant, repeating something. It took 3 replays the next day to make it out. Let her in. Let her in. Let her in. I don't know how to explain it, but the voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded tired, like something that had been speaking for years without being heard. On impulse, I drove out to the Portland archives the next day and asked to see any maps of the neighborhood from the 1980s. I told the clerk I was doing research for a book. After 30 minutes of flipping through files, I found something strange. My apartment building hadn't always been there. The space had once been home to a boarding house, which burned down in 1984. 4 people died in the fire. The owner, an older woman, survived, but her daughter had not. Her name? Elaine Rooker. The timelines didn't make sense at first. If she vanished in 1983, how was she in a building that burned down in 1984? Unless she never really vanished. Unless the fire wasn't an accident. That night, I didn't wait until 3 a.m. At 2:30, I turned off all the lights, sat on the edge of the bed, and waited. At 2:59, my apartment went cold again. I said out loud, "Elaine, if you're still here, I want to understand." There was a pause. Then the crying started again, but softer, like it was coming from someone sitting just outside the door. I stood up, slowly. My feet felt like stone. I walked to the front door. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Something in me screamed not to open it. But another part, deeper, quieter, urged me forward. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. Dim yellow light from the stairwell flickered at the far end. The air smelled of rain and dust. Then I looked down. On the welcome mat was a single, soaking wet photograph. A Polaroid. It showed a young woman standing in a hallway that looked exactly like mine. Her eyes were blacked out, her mouth slightly open, and behind her, barely visible in the shadows, something else stood. Something tall. Something watching her. I dropped the photo and slammed the door. Since that night, the crying hasn't stopped. It happens every night now. Always at 3 a.m. Some nights it's louder, others it's barely audible. But she's always there. And lately, I've started hearing footsteps. Not outside. Inside. Crossing the hallway when I'm in bed. Pacing. Like someone looking for something they lost. Or someone. The footsteps began subtly. At first, I thought it was the creaking of the floorboards as the old building settled during the colder nights. But over time, I noticed a pattern. 3 slow steps. A pause. Then 3 more. Always after the crying faded. Always right outside my bedroom door. One night, I placed a strip of tape at the bottom of the door, something I'd seen done in ghost investigation videos. The idea was simple. If the tape moved or lifted, it meant someone, or something, was on the other side. At 2:50 a.m., I placed it down. At 3:04, the crying stopped. At 3:07, the steps started. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Stop. My breath caught. I didn't move. My bedroom light was off, and I sat in the far corner of the room, near the window, holding a flashlight that I didn't dare to turn on. Every muscle in my body was tense. The step stopped directly in front of my door. I waited. Nothing. Just silence. Eventually, I fell asleep with my back against the wall. When I woke up around 6:30, the light from the window was soft and gray. I stood up, stiff and cold, and went to the door. The tape was peeled halfway off. That same morning, I decided to contact someone outside my circle. Someone who might take this seriously. Through a Reddit thread on local urban legends, I found a user named Oliver who claimed to have investigated paranormal activity in the Portland area. I sent him a message with everything. The recordings, the photos, the crying, the fire. He replied within an hour. He wanted to meet. We agreed on a time. Friday night at 10 p.m. Oliver showed up right on time. He was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, but carried himself with calm confidence. He wore a dark green jacket, a black backpack slung over one shoulder. His first words when I opened the door were, "You weren't exaggerating. This place feels heavy." We spent an hour going over the history I had uncovered. He nodded often but said little. After I showed him the Polaroid that had appeared on my doormat, his expression changed. "Something's trying to communicate with you," he said. "But it's not just her. It's older, darker." I didn't like the way he said that. At midnight, we set up his equipment. Audio recorders, EMF detectors, a motion-activated infrared camera in the hallway. Then we waited. The apartment was silent. At 2:59, the temperature dropped like clockwork. Oliver's EMF reader began to tick, softly at first, then stronger as the seconds passed. At 3 a.m., the crying returned. This time, it was louder than ever. It echoed through the apartment like the sound of someone mourning deep inside a church, full of pain and loss. Oliver stood up, holding the EMF reader, his eyes scanning the air. "She's not alone," he said quietly. I asked what he meant. "There's something else here, feeding off her pain." The next part is hard to explain. From the corner of the living room, a shadow moved. Not fast, not threatening, but present. It stretched slowly across the wall, even though there was no source of light that could have caused it. The temperature continued to drop. Oliver took a step toward it, recorder in hand. "If there's someone here," he said calmly, "we want to help. Tell us what happened." And then, the crying stopped. Silence filled the room. Not normal silence, but a dense, suffocating one. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Suddenly, the motion camera in the hallway snapped a photo. Click. Oliver rushed to the device and pulled the image. When he held it under the flashlight, we both stared. It showed the hallway outside my bedroom door. The tape was gone, and a figure stood in front of the door. Not the woman. Something taller. God, wearing what looked like an old suit, soaked in water. Its eyes were nothing but black pits, and its mouth was slightly open, like it had been caught mid-whisper. Oliver muttered, "That's not Elaine." He insisted we stop the session. We turned the lights back on and packed up the gear. He told me he'd return after researching more, but in the meantime, he gave me a small bag of salt and instructed me to line the windows and door frames. That night, the crying didn't come, but the silence felt worse, like something was waiting. 2 days later, I received a voicemail from Oliver. He sounded nervous, uncertain. "I found something." There were whispers about a man named Thomas Rooker, Elaine's father. Some say he was involved in occult practices. I don't know how deep this goes, but I think she's not the only one bound to that place. He didn't answer my texts after that. The next day, I drove to the address he gave me, an old house on the outskirts of the city where the Rookers once lived. The house was abandoned. The front door had been nailed shut long ago, but the side entrance hung open. Inside, dust clung to everything. The floor creaked with every step. In the living room, I found a fireplace. Above it, a cracked photograph hung crooked on the wall. It was a family portrait. A woman, a man, a young girl, Elaine, and the man next to her, with deep-set eyes and a slight, off-kilter smile, looked eerily familiar. It was the figure from the hallway photo. I left the house shaking. When I returned to my apartment that night, the salt I had laid out earlier was scattered across the floor. My bedroom window was open, and the Polaroid that I had locked in a drawer was now lying on my pillow. Except now, there were two figures in it, Elaine and her father, standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder, her eyes wide with something between fear and pleading. Since that night, I haven't been able to sleep past 2:50 a.m. The crying is different now, more urgent. Some nights, she's at the window. Other nights, I swear I see her reflection in the bathroom mirror, though no one's in the room. I've started hearing my name being whispered, and last night, I woke up with dirt on my sheets. I didn't bring it in, but it was there, and it smelled like the fireplace ash in that house. The story isn't over. It's only getting deeper, and whatever Elaine is trying to tell me, whatever happened to her father, and to that fire, it's far from finished. And I'm beginning to think the reason she chose my window isn't random. I think she remembers something. Something only I can help her uncover. Or something I was never meant to see. I've tried leaving. I even packed a bag last week, told myself I'd stay with Carlos again, just for a while. But when I stepped outside at 2 a.m., I saw her, standing across the street, drenched, barefoot, not moving, just watching me. And I couldn't go. It's like something here doesn't want me to leave. Or worse, it needs me to stay. Every clue I found, every whisper, every shadow, has pointed to a truth that's buried beneath layers of silence and fire. Something terrible happened here, something no one wanted to face. Elaine's crying isn't just grief. It's a warning, and the figure that follows her, the one in the photographs, in the footsteps, in the mirrors, it's not done. Not with her. Not with me. Tonight, I'm going back to that house. The fireplace, the photo, the memories trapped in the walls. Maybe the answers are still there, waiting to be uncovered. Maybe if I understand what happened to Elaine, I can set her free. But deep down, I know this isn't just her story anymore. It's mine now. And if I don't come back to tell you what I find, promise me something. If you ever hear someone crying outside your window at 3 a.m., don't look. Don't speak. And whatever you do, don't let her in.